Divas, welcome or welcome back to the channel. I cannot believe that we are wrapping up this year. And as I was starting to look back at like my favorite reads of the year, there's a whole like award show I'm putting together to come, okay? But it made me start to think about some of my favorite reads of all time. Now, if you've been here for a hot minute, you know that I argued with myself for days, to be honest, about this. The list changed multiple times. So, this is not like the only list. Like, maybe we'll make this a series, but these are 7 of my favorite reads of all time, not the 7 favorite reads of my reading life. Does that make sense? So, yes, these are, and this is only because, like, maybe I have commitment issues. Who's to say? Another topic for my therapist, right? But these are 7 of my favorite reads that I just like. If someone came to me and they were like, I need a book, I think this is where I would go. At least today, at least this week, right? So we'll do more where I'll do 7 more of my favorite reads. But for now, this is where we're starting. Before we dive in, like, subscribe, tell a friend, tell an enemy. Let's keep this party going, yeah? Okay. So first up, that said, we're going to start with the shortest of these because I have realized that, like, I like big books and I cannot lie. Listen, it's just the way it kind of came out in the wash for this grouping. But we're starting with the shortest one. And the shortest book, one of my favorite reads of life, is Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. Ladies and gentlemen, it is about 2 sisters who are both born in Ghana. One stays, the other is enslaved and sent to the United States. It's an epic tale that spans many years, yes, but it's done in this very concise, digestible way, but without losing any of its epic impact. Does that make sense? Like, this book could easily be 3 times the length of this book, and I feel like it would still work and still have this incredible impact. But the fact that it's like here and streamlined in a very digestible, I think 300 pages, yes, it really I love and works, but also still feels like an epic, yeah, which I think there's really a lot to be said about that. There is such beautiful imagery in this, particularly around water and family. And this is one of those books that, like, when you finish it, I'm most left with the feeling and the yearning and the, like, the sadness. I mean, it's filled with tragedy, but there's just a beautiful loving and longing and tragedy in this work that just, it feels like a hug. I have heard that their second book, Transcendent Kingdom, didn't land for folks as much as this one did. And to be honest, because I love this one so much, I have not tackled Transcendent Kingdom. And I might skip it and see. I hope that there will be more work from this author. There's also such poetry in her language. The prose is just impeccable, and it's filled with this like thick, florid imagery, but presented in a way that is like totally digestible and totally meaningful and requires time to sit with it, but yet will also propel you through this like really incredible, complex story. Love, love, love. There was something, oh, I love this book so much to the point that I was down in the United States of Texas for a small period of time. And I was talking to I made good friends with this girl at the coffee shop, and we were talking about books, and and I think I suggested this book. I may have just finished it, or we were just talking about books in general, and I suggested it, and I was like, who am I coming in here and like, just like buying all this coffee all the time, and like, she's working here, and I'm like, you should go buy this book. And I was like, no. So I literally ran to the closest bookstore right after that, bought it, came back, literally basically threw it at her because it was like so awkward. Basically like threw it at her and was like, here, this is the book I was talking about. You need to read this. Thanks, bye, love you. And left. Awkward? Maybe. I don't know. But like that is how much I feel like we should be reading this book. It is really impactful. I don't want to give away any of the like specifics of the plot, but an epic about the impact of slavery both on those that stayed and in their home country as well as those who were trafficked to the United States and enslaved there. Incredible work. Okay, now for something completely different. Listen, I am, I think, pretty critical of books that try too hard, or books that I think are like trying to do something, but it's a little sweaty and doesn't quite work. Um, or folks like it because it makes them feel smart, or folks are writing a book in a way that it's like, isn't this so smart? I feel like I can normally spot that from a distance, yes? To me, this book did not feel like that. This book feels like what those other books are trying to do. And maybe in my defense, I don't stand alone on this, considering this person did win the Nobel Prize. The book is Septology, which you all, if you've been here for a hot minute, have probably heard me talk about ad nauseum. I love this book. That said, it is for the literary nerds, I think, or for the aspiring literary nerd, or honestly for someone who wants to try something different. Because I think this is the key with this book, is that it is trying something different and I think lands the plane successfully. There are no periods, okay? I think all of Fosse's work doesn't have a period. So that we just don't, there will be question marks, which is helpful, but there are no periods. Okay. This work, plot, sure. The takeaway from this, though, for me, is the exploration of themes. And there are so many themes packed into this that I think are explored in fascinating ways. We have themes of like duality. We use the same name sometimes for two different characters that I think is really a commentary on either, and see, this is why it's so fun because it's rife for conversation. It's either like different choices we could make and then the lives that would come from those choices, or it's like the inner duality between us, which actually is maybe why I liked Audition so much, because I think the book did that. It was kind of like the duality of choice and like what would happen if we made this choice versus that choice, kind of, but this is really on like a macro level and takes it like so deep and so meditative. There's so much repetition, but I think that the repetition is so intentional. And with this idea of creating this kind of like mantra so that you're really allowing the mind to quiet itself so that you can meditate on the themes that are being explored. There are also some really fascinating themes of explorations on addiction, right? And I think that they're handled in these very unique ways that it's like can be very bleak. But again, that's paired with the doppelganger idea or this like duality where it's like, well, what would life have happened if that wasn't the choices we were making? Or do we have all of that inside of us? Are all of these things happening at once? I think it kind of plays with time in that way. It's about like, there's like love and sex and death is a huge theme of his work. And I feel like it's such a fascinating, just study exploration, which sounds so nose in the air, but it's true, of these really deep themes. And also, I think because of the repetition and because of the way it's written, you really approach this work by just like allowing it to wash over you. So don't go into this thinking like, okay, so this is really important and I've got to make sure that I understand this, and then this plot point might come up later and I've got to think about vibe. Genuinely, I read a chunk of this on the beach in Hawaii, which is a little wild. But I feel like it kind of meets the core of the vibe of this book. Just let it wash over you. Allow the meditative repetition to just take your mind and allow it to quiet so that you can sink deeper and deeper into these explorations. If you're not looking for that sort of like heady, I don't, journey into like deep themes about love, life, sex, addiction, duality, then wait until it's the right book for you. But yeah, I also felt like the lack of periods, once you're used to it, it didn't feel annoying at all. It actually feels like, again, it's helping send you on this path of like meditation. For me, with this work, I will say Vime, the lack of periods felt a little different. I do wonder what it'll feel like with the whole work together, because I think that Vime is the first in a trilogy. That's something else to look at. And again, I think it's also different than the bee sting, when I think the mother section doesn't use periods, if memory serves. But again, I think that treatment is different, and I think that's more of a commentary on the character, where I think this is a tool to pull you into the meditative quality. Anyways, I could talk about this one literally all day. Very different experiences, very plot driven, very emotional, very will pull at your heartstrings. It tackles a lot of really horrific and difficult subject matter through the plot exploration, while also digging into very emotional truths. But it's a different than like this, almost like meditation. Does that make sense? Love. Okay, another honker. And this one I read this year. Y'all, I don't know how and why, first of all, it took me so long, but B, that I fell in love with it so much. It's kind of I don't know. I don't know. Because also, and one of the fun things I think about, at least me and books in general, is that like, I don't think any of these are perfect books. I think we could have like, I mean, this could inspire debates all day long. Like, and I'm sure more people that dislike this book than like it, to be fair. And I think that there were moments, maybe even of Homegoing, that were like, oh, okay, well, like maybe this moved a little slowly or this, whatever. Like, this is not about perfect books. These are books about that I love and that I think like are so worthy of the investment, because I think that all of their strengths outweigh the maybe like minor moments of like friction, in terms of like, oh, well, I wish this had been a little different. Because also, A, who am I? But B, I think the idea of a perfect book is a little, I don't know. Do y'all have a perfect book? Like, meaning like no parts were slow. You wouldn't change a thing? I have to think about that. Ooh, that's a good video. I wonder. We'll see. But the corrections. So, because again, like there are certain, when the brother flies off, and I think there's like a get rich quick scheme. There are like moments of that where I'm just like, really? I don't. Okay. But as a whole, his dialogue, the way Franzen writes dialogue should be studied. If you are a writer, please study the way he writes dialogue. Please. If you're a television writer, please even more study this. It is so authentic. The realism, I drown in the realism. I am truly in awe of the way he writes dialogue and the story at large. I think that the like kind of like boomer generation that is captured so successfully in this book, particularly in kind of like this like middle America vibe, is done with such authority and such precision, and like it's just excellent. Yeah, I think that again, the way he writes not only these characters, but really I think his strengths are the relationships between the characters, and the like what's being said versus what's being not said versus what's being implied versus the implications of our actions on the greater. And I also think there's something so interesting about like the what's the right word for this, like the epic nature of the length of his work and yet also the intimacy of it. That juxtaposition I think is so fascinating because I think that there's actually so much intimacy in the hyper realism of his writing, but yet the fact that it takes place in this like macro form is so unique and interesting. And like I just I think it's really great. I'm reading Freedom. I wanted to read it this year. I'm going to be honest. All the reading goals that are stacking up, I don't know if I'm going to get to it this year because the other thing about him too is that something about him makes me slow down. I generally take my time with Franzen. A, because they're so long, but B, like I don't know if it's the hyper realism or what, but it forces me to slow down a little bit. Um Also like Alan Hollinghurst, who's not I don't want to give anything away. There were a lot of debates in this house. And by in this house, I mean with me, myself, and I. Um, so yeah, we'll be doing another video. But anyways, so the corrections, the corrections, the corrections. It's a story about a middle American family and what happens as we age and grow as a family, and like both the impact of age like on the individual as well as the impact of age on the family itself generationally, what is expected of the family both within those micro dynamics as well as the macro dynamics. 10 out of 10. I loved it. Okay, now for something totally different from that. And this one isn't like too much of a honker. It's not short. 380? Is 380 a honker? 380 is flirting with honker territory. I feel like once we get over 400, that's when we're in honker. Yeah. But it's The Prophets, ladies and gentlemen. This is a story, at its core, a love story about two enslaved men. It's difficult. It's beautifully written. It is poetic. It is unique. It is singular in my heart for what it does and the way it does it. I feel like it tackles the complexities of that story so genuinely and with such care and heart. I love it. There were times where I do feel like some of the maybe foreshadowing was like a little heavy-handed, but everything else so outweighed that minuscule critique that I could not help but include it on this list. It's beautiful. And the ending is so unique and interesting and like rife for conversation. I read this in a book club and we just kept talking about it, and folks had different opinions about it. To me, it was very clear. I would love to know what you all think. But this, it's truly epic. And I don't know if Robert Jones Jr. has written another book since. I don't think so because I do keep sniffing around. And I just want to let you know, sir, he won't see this video, that I'm waiting with bated breath for your next book. I feel that this is such a piece of art and just like so beautifully crafted, and it just feels like it's this beautiful intersection of so many different ways of life and parts of history and like parts of our heart all combined into this one beautiful journey. Love The Prophets. Okay, this is a honker, and recently I did not know that there were differing opinions on this. Recently, folks have been really pushing back online about this particular book. I let's talk about it, and then we can have the discussion. But it's A Little Life. Now, this is a honker and a half. I know, a lot of long books. But wait, we're getting ready for hibernation. In February, you were going to thank me that I turned you on to some of these. Hopefully, I turned you on to at least one, or reminded you, oh, I need to read that, or reread it. So in February, you'll thank me, because where are we going? At least where I live, I'm already like planning what will keep me within my 2-block radius. A Little Life. Side note, I actually really liked her first book too, People in the Trees. It really keeps you going to like, I think the literal last page. I don't know if it's the last sentence, but like all the way to the final page. I really enjoyed it. Now, to Paradise, different chat. But today we're talking about A Little Life. I still miss these characters. And that to me is what is so powerful. One of the things that's so powerful about this work. Yes, we can have a conversation about, I do think that this author really like draws on like queer trauma a lot, and like it's particularly like queer male trauma, and like capitalizes it in a lot of their work. To me, it's handled it's extreme, but it is handled in a way that does, for me, feel authentic. Now, it's been a hot minute since I've read it, so like, would I have the same opinion today in this minute? I don't know, but I think so because, like I said earlier, I miss the characters. So if you can write a character multiple characters that I miss, I'm sorry, what? Like, artistry. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that to me is the success. And I don't think that if the like extreme trauma that some of these characters experience rang false, that I would miss the characters the way that I do. They feel like friends still to this day. And I read this years ago. I still miss them. I think they just recently came out with a new audiobook. I don't know if I could listen to it though. That feels like a lot. And that might be extreme. And that actually, because reading the physical book and then listening to the audiobook are two fundamentally different experiences. So I do wonder if like hearing that would require or elicit a different response than reading the physical. Because hearing that and having someone read it might feel a little like, whoa. Because a friend of mine listened to Flesh on audiobook, and I could imagine that the sparse prose in audiobook would maybe not even work versus when you're reading it on the page and the starkness of it. Does that make sense? A Little Life. It's basically about a group of friends and the hardships that they have endured prior to their friendship that ultimately impact their lives. And it's just a lot of heartache. So I don't want to give away too much. Also, there's like so much that's covered. Like, where do we even start? And I don't like spoiler things, anyways. Especially if you haven't read it yet. And it's also worse than you think. It's worse than you think. But yeah, it's also like about queerness, because I think that like some of the characters you could make an argument that they're not gay, or that they're exploring, or that it's really about like the love of the human versus the sexuality, which I actually really relate to because of like past life, the things that like my life has taught me in the past. So I think that is also a really beautiful part of this. But yeah, to me, I think there's like with the critique of the extreme, I feel like Yanagihara does a nice job of giving us a robust backstory that is extreme and horrible, but also the reality that many people face, and which leads us to understand the choices that certain characters make in modern day, which lead them into very precarious, horrible, treacherous situations. And again, maybe that's because of like life experiences, right? Like understanding now having some distance from maybe choices that I would make differently as I have gotten older, and like understanding why I made those choices and being able to then go back to kind of the impetus from like early days that inspired the choices that happened later. Something about that piece of it just really resonated with me and made me feel like it was done really well. I'm sorry. But A Little Life is one of my faves. Okay, this next one, which is so... There is a woman who runs a book club who I love very much. Hi, Susan. I hope you're watching. And she and I agree on most things. We fundamentally have a disagreement on this book, which is wild and crazy to me because I loved it. That said, and this is maybe one of the reasons why I loved it, I didn't love it until I got it. The book is The Overstory. It won the Pulitzer. I forget which year. Okay. So this book to me, I got it. I was enjoying it, love Richard Powers. I was working my way through. And then when I was in like somewhere in the middle, so after page 153, so within the middle 200 pages of the book, which is called The Trunk, because it's divided into multiple sections. So when I was in the trunk, I was like, this is moving so slowly. I was like, the roots, which is the opening section, I was like, I felt like it was so interesting and dynamic, and we were getting all of these different characters and backstories, and the scene was being set in this really interesting way, and now we're in the trunk, and it just feels so slow. Because he structured the book and his writing to mimic the parts of the tree. And like the intention of the storytelling and the prose and the way he crafted the work was to make you feel like you were in the trunk of the tree, and everything does move slow. It grows more slowly. It's literally longer. It takes you more time to get from the roots, right, up the trunk to the crown, which I think is the next section. Yes. And once we get into like the crown, and particularly I think the seeds, he's like bopping around. Because it's like the leaves and the seeds are falling off the tree, and it's like you're bebopping around into all of these stories, because he sets it up in this like multiple different stories that in some ways overlap, but ultimately just kind of have the same kind of like nature theme through them. And I loved it. And I think if nothing else for the intellectual exercise. And so again, like maybe that's why like this is a rife conversation for disagreement, because maybe folks don't want to read something for the intellectual exercise, and they're like, I just want a good story and you're boring me in the trunk. Especially if it's a honker and you're like, wait, because when you look at the whole and you think 200 pages moves slowly, you're like, well, that's not as big a deal in the whole. But if you're thinking 200 pages, like some of these books I got laying around here are 200 pages. Like that's the whole book being slow. You know what I mean? So fine. And I love Susan. I respect Susan. But this will forever be our book of disagreement. Again, I loved it. I loved it. And now for something completely different out of all of these. I do think for this one, you need to prepare yourself. This was a very difficult read for me. I read this when it first came out. Very intense. Nonfiction. Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. I actually read this before I read The Warmth of Other Suns. I might like Caste more, but they are also almost like unable to compare. Like they're almost so different that comparing them is like, well, we're only comparing them because she wrote both. Does that make sense? Because I think that they both tackle the same but different subject, or the same subject from different angles and in such different ways that, again, I think it's the only comparison is because they are written by Isabel Wilkerson, the same author. And I think that had they been written by two different authors, I don't think the comparison would even be made. I think it would be like, read both. Does that make sense? So this looks at the caste system in America, and it explores the atrocities of the foundational building blocks of the United States of America and where we live, and how things have come to be what they are today because of the foundation, because of the way because of what everything has been built on top of. It takes a look at how choices that were made in this country were borrowed by other countries, were initially, in some instances, thrown out as too extreme, which is wild considering kind of the trajectory of some of those countries, yes, and some of the atrocities that they committed. We're reading between the lines here, but I encourage you to read this and see for yourself, because this really impacted me and underlined so many of the things that I think many of us know. And if you don't know, oh my gosh, an even greater opportunity to learn in this way. I think that she really illuminates some fundamental, foundational elements of this country in unique, dynamic, engaging ways that were either delivered in the opposite way in some of our history classes, or in ways that were perhaps softened. Yes, and she is impossibly sourced. So it's really lovely to see that this is, when it shines a light on things that might challenge what you have previously known, it does so with facts and figures and documentation, and hopefully in ways that will challenge and inspire and evolve some of our friends. Could not recommend higher. This was not an argument. I think, well, it was more of an argument of like, which Wilkerson do I include? And rightfully so, because her work is so deep and well put together and impossibly well researched. I don't know when her next book will be coming out. I selfishly hope that it is sooner rather than later, because I am yearning for more of her brilliant brain. She is truly a national treasure. Okay. Those are 7 of my favorite reads of all time. And I cannot wait to talk to you about my favorite reads of 2025. I was going back and forth. I was going to do the awards, because again, we talked in another video about I'm splitting my reads into categories. So we're gonna have winners of different categories versus these are my favorite books of the year. And I was gonna do it this week, but I read quite a bit a month. And there were gonna be some not honkers, but there were gonna be some a good chunk of books that I was gonna finish after that video. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna wait. So at the beginning of January, we're gonna do the awards show, and it will include all of the books, or all of the books that I read in 2025 truly will be eligible for these awards. So I'm excited to do that. Stay tuned. In fact, if you're excited to see it too, subscribe so you can get a reminder, because they will be coming. And I think it'll be fun, right? We tend to have fun around here. So I'm trying to make the awards fun and cute. Yeah? Okay. Tell a friend, tell an enemy, and in the meantime, I will see you next week.